Oh, hello there. Welcome to the live stream. I'm actually trying to stream on both TikTok and Instagram. All right, let's see what we're getting here. Try to tilt this up a little bit better so we actually get a little bit better angle. Mm, Okay, might work better if I get this up here. There we go. That's better. Okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Praying Coach. And hey, this is a live stream partly because it's snow outside. I am snowed in, and I figured I'd want to see how you guys are doing and answer any questions you might have. So, again, I'm the Praying Coach. I'm Ben. If you got any questions today, I'm going to be talking about essentially the value blindness reset. I recently introduced an offer for you guys that is essentially to help you better understand your spouse, better understand what you've been missing about them, so you can connect better, so you can really connect and integrate better. Uh, I've been learning a lot recently about what it looks like to cherish and honor your spouse and actually be able to really see their value in your life. And so I actually wanted to help other folks reach that point too. A lot of times we don't know what we don't know, or they actually have with that person. Uh, Now, I don't know. I've been married 15 years, going on 16 years this June or July. Sorry, this July. Um, Wonderful woman. The Lord connected us. I've talked about it in some of my videos. This was one of those things where God told me that this was going to be my wife, but it took a while. It took a while for me to get it. So once I got into this, I decided, okay, I want to value her. However, I discovered that there's some things that happen inadvertently. They're not something I meant to do. But when I did not pay attention to the value she brought, she felt it. She didn't feel valued. She withdrew. I then felt like there was an empty hole. A lot of other issues could happen. Now, you and I, if you're married, you know your spouse is the one person in your life that you have told God you're going to be with until your death. And so anything that looks like it's going to destroy that is, it's really something you want to avoid, right? You want to get away from it. You don't want to actually um, go that direction. So I want to bring up some information that I ran across that I thought was incredibly helpful and yet also deeply disturbing. Um, Now, a lot of times we take a theoretical and we have a hard time conceptualizing, really getting our head wrapped around it. So I went and looked up a couple of different options for how to get my head wrapped around. Well, what does marriage really look like? One of them was the notion of marriage being like trying to mix two metals. I don't know how much anybody knows about making an alloy. I certainly didn't know a whole lot. But metals, when you try to work them together, if you've ever seen, some of the familiar metals, whether it be tin or even steel or some of these others, we really don't think too much about what's involved in the process because we just use it. But your marriage is something God is doing and alloying, if you will. He's bringing you two together, but he's intermixing you. When two become one, it's quite literally just that. It's like you're being formed into one being, or an alloy of the two that you were before. There's a series of different things that happen, and a lot of times it's depending upon the metals that he's bringing together, that your life is going to be potentially harder for certain things. He has a purpose and plan for all of us. God knows the purposes and plans he has for you, and he has a hope and a future for you. He has a hope and a future for your marriage. So sometimes it helps us to look at our marriage from a different vantage point. I have looked at it from 2. 1, what is the value my wife brings into my life that if I didn't have her there and I needed the same value, what would it cost me? The other is, what does it take to get her and I to mix together? That whole two becoming one. What would it take for a parallel of, say, alloying a metal? And basically mixing two metals. And I did some research, and because my wife is a musician, and because we have the desire to resonate with who God is, and allow that to resonate into the world, I asked, in this case, I asked Gemini, hey, can you do some research? What metals are really hard to mix? And what ones are really good for resonance? What ones are really good for transmitting sound? And it's curious. Beryllium and copper are a very interesting mix, because what you have with those two is that you have beryllium, which requires it's toxic. It's in its pure form, it's not healthy for humans to handle, but we use it all the time, and it's actually something that will make the copper become um, a lot more, kind of, it'll benefit, it'll transmit sound better. It'll actually really conduct sound. But the process by which those two metals have to go together is very high temperature, and over the right period of time and under the right pressure. And a lot of times we don't think of God making us into one, by way of time, pressure, and heat. But that's what he does. He takes us, and it's the smelting process, or the melting process, or whatever you want to look at it as, from the metallurgical standpoint. He's doing that to us. He's reshaping us. He's reshaping our spouse, and the value that that person brings into our lives is incredibly important. The In the case of the beryllium copper that can actually transmit sound really well. It takes the metal of copper, which is very flexible, and it hardens it to just the right amount to be able to create that sound. Uh, Now, another take on this is actually going to be the idea of, what is the cost of not having that person around? You ever thought about that? If you are married, have you ever thought about what's the cost of not having them around? Not how much does it cost you to have them around, but what is the cost of not having them around? Um, Now, sometimes we kind of pursue things, and we look at it and we say, okay, I don't value them, they don't value me, what I contribute to the relationship is not being appreciated. What we don't realize is that we miss what they contribute as well, because we're blind to it. I actually recently I have an offer on my website that's actually called Value Blindness Reset. And I want to walk people through the idea that you are blind to what your spouse brings. And maybe it would help if you were able to see what you're not seeing, because then you would value them, and they would feel valued. So let me just bring up what I actually have on that. And I want to go over some of that with you, because it's really eye opening. Let's say you have, we'll just start with a family of two kids, two parents, average American family based on the numbers, not based upon your experience. And what we have with that, and let me see if I can bring this up here. Okay, there we go. We'll bring this. I've got some information I have to read from here. Doing a number of number crunching things. I went in, with our favorite search engines and favorite AI searches, and I scraped some numbers together to see what it would be if, I were to hire professionals to do what my wife does. Now, I did the same thing for me too. And we don't always think about this because we are so used to them being around, but what would it actually cost to replace your spouse? And it's amazing. Quite literally, it boils down to, lifetime wise, you could be leaving $15 million on the table if you weren't married, in terms of what it would cost you to operate your life as you now have it with your spouse, if they just disappeared. Now, I know that seems a little out there, but it was one of those things that I had to dig through. So, 120,000 annually, family of four. And if you look at, let me see here. Yeah, okay. If we looked at this as in marriage, the job descriptions, cooking, cleaning, uh, doing the yard work, handyman, add in protection, security, a variety of other things. Okay, you could have a variety of different dollar amounts if you hired those people. So let's say the basic male bundle of things that a male typically contributes would be things like perhaps some childcare time, giving wife a break. She's not on it 24/7 necessarily, but she may be. So about 1,000 to 1,300 a month. Doing lawn exterior work. If you actually had to hire somebody, 225 to 450 a month. On call repair maintenance, 500 to 800. If you had 24/7 security guard hired, 20,000, 30,000 a month, could be more or less, but basically what you have is anywhere between 21,000 and $32,000 a month of services that are provided by the male in the relationship. And if you go break down kind of the key female things that often are associated, but aren't always, domestic and child care, 2,000, 2,500, gardening, potentially 50 to 150, interior design, 100 to 250, organizing mental load outsourcing, 90 to 240 a month, extra housekeeping, 100 to 200. If you hired professionals, that's what it would cost you. So the total is somewhere between 2,300 and 3,300. So that's a total there, but that was my initial thing, and then I went and looked and said, okay, well, what if we really kind of split that out in a different way? Um, and you look at it as what does that person contribute long term? And I had to add a few things because I realized, that didn't include things like laundry or 24/7 childcare because my wife is always on duty with the kids. We have a monitor next to the bed and she's always listening. So I included that because it really seems like both men and women bring an equal amount to the table. We don't always think about it, but we do. So if you were to look at it as, kind of the core assumptions of with adjustments, somewhere between, around $20,000 a month replacement cost. Okay. So we bring $20,000 to the table, $20,000 each of us, male and female. $20,000 is a decent chunk of money per month for what each other does. It's unpaid labor. Oh, okay, fine. So we do that. What does that add up to over a lifetime? Now I know that adds up to a lot. And like I said, 15 million on the table. You are talking about the potential, of around, you know, 250 to 300,000 is what's brought to the table by each spouse of unpaid labor. Unpaid. Now, do you actually think about that? Because I didn't. Does my wife actually bring 200 to 300,000 to the table? Well, what would it mean that I would need in order to replace what I'm doing to live the same lifestyle? It would mean I'd have to, easily pay, almost $400,000. So would she. $400,000 to replace me. Hmm. Or to replace her. Seems a little odd. So that was the number basis. Now, going back to that, what we don't pay attention to a lot of the time is that dollar value is not real. It's not actually in hand. If we actually had, them leave, if they suddenly disappeared, we would not have to put that out of pocket. But also, we would be missing kind of the core things, like where would the intimacy be? Where would the shoulder to cry on be? You could hire some of those out, but at some point, there's a core component to this that you could never get from anybody you hired out, ever. Now, if you couldn't hire that out, how would you meet the most basic needs that are met in a marriage? How would you meet the most basic needs that we kind of take for granted? Would you hire it out? Would you find friends? What would you do? So, the value of your spouse is not the dollar value. That was just kind of a picture. It's ridiculous. Your spouse is intended to be yours and you are theirs by God's design. The point of basically, them being in your life and you being in theirs is to expand your representation of who God is in the world. When Adam and Eve, when Adam was created perfect, yet God said it's not good for him to be alone. When Adam was created, he was one being, yet God said it was not good for him to be alone. So took part of his side and made men are very good because one was created for the other, one was created out of the other. Done the way we want, it's not said the way we want, and so on. Much of that goes back to the blindness to what the value is of that individual. Um, I like to look at the creation of Adam and Eve from the standpoint of God was intending for Adam to be a representation of him. So he said, I made Adam in my image and likeness. Great. Here is an image and likeness of God in the flesh. But then he said, it's not good for Adam to be alone. So he took Adam and separated out Eve. And he said, okay, this is good. They are made for each other. And when they come back together, they're going to best represent me. They can each represent me on their own, but they'll best represent me when they're together. Classical hologram example. If you take a hologram that was a film hologram and you cut it in pieces, you get the same full image, but a lower resolution when you look at it with the same laser light. If you could put them back together, it would be a higher resolution. So Adam and Eve were originally intended to be together so they could present the highest resolution image and likeness of who God is. Of course, sin happened. Things fell apart. Adam had to work the land. Eve had to essentially find herself in a position where she was always wanting to have want what her husband had or have control over him, but he would rule over her, as the word says. Okay, that was the fall. And then came Jesus. And Jesus said, okay, they're not male and female anymore in Jesus because he came and he fulfilled. He was the second Adam. So we're back to the place where we can now come together and be the highest resolution that God has purpose for us to be, as long as Jesus is in the mix. We're two or more gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst. Well, husband and wife gathered together, he is there in their midst. That ups the resolution to the highest image likeness possible, as long as we are allowing ourselves to be consistently cleaned by his word. We are under attack by our thoughts, by society, by a lot of things, to reduce that image, to reduce that resolution, to basically step into a lower resolution version of who we are, not the fullness of who God says. You and I were created to give him glory, honor, and praise. However, it's much easier to give ourselves glory, honor, and praise. It's much easier to give uh, anything, glory, honor, and praise above God, because we look at it and we say, all right, I want I want money, I want fame, I want whatever, and we give ourselves glory, honor, and praise, or somebody else, rather than saying, God, you're worthy of it. Um, I like the idea of being able to go before Him and just give Him praise and worship. I also want to remind folks that we are doing that all the time. You and I can give God glory, honor, and praise in the midst of this life in a way we'll never be able to give him in eternity. We'll never be able to give him in any other way, especially in suffering. But also, when we're married, we can give it to him in a way that we never could before or will be able to after. And it's how we live our life out. Um, that's why I want to encourage everybody to seek to see that which they have been blind to in their spouse, so that they can see the value that God places on them. And the the value that God places on them is then what we can choose to value in them. When I look at my wife, I always want to see her as God sees her. Now, do I always? No. No, my wounds do get in the way, just like yours do. But I seek to see her as God sees her, and I seek to help her see herself as God sees her. I am I am in the process of being able to have my eyes open more and more each day, to the point where she is more beautiful today than she was yesterday, more beautiful today than she was the day we got married. And the purpose of that from God's perspective is he wants me to see what he's growing in her. Now, I also think She gets that with me. She gets to see things in me that she didn't see from the day we married. She's learned over time to value those things in me. That's part of what brings us close together. It's also part of what brings us back to that resolution of representing him. Um, I am always amazed every time I turn around at what new thing I get a glimpse of. Uh, so when I look at her and I see her smiling and laughing, I value that more now than I ever did before because I see a beauty in that I never saw before. And that allows me to see something through God's eyes. It's like he gave her laughter so that she can light up the room, right? When I went through and did this, the value blindness reset, I realized, the value of what she brings is so much more than anything I could ever replace if she was not around. That, of course, God would do that. She exponentially increases my ability to do things, but also I can exponentially increase hers. And a lot of our marriages tend to circle around this whole thing of, well, I don't feel this, I don't feel that. The self-centered thing, which we tend toward a lot of the time. I mean, it's not hard. It's not hard to look in the mirror and think that we are, not enough, or we don't have enough, or whatever it is about us. But the God ordained way is to be the conduit for the Lord to the other person first, and they can be the conduit to us so that we build things up. It spirals up. It up cycles, not down cycles. And it's easy to down cycle, right? I mean, when's the last time you got in an argument and got to that rage point practically, and you pulled out all the stops and began saying things you really didn't mean, but you said them because they hurt, and you realized it actually had spiraled down to the point of wanting to hurt the other, even though you love them. Now, the value reset, the value blindness reset, like I said, it's on my website. The point is to get us back to that, almost back to the drawing board, you could say, but back to that starting point where we can say, okay, I'm not going to focus on my deficit in this, but I'm going to focus on what God has provided for me in this other individual. Because once I focus on what God has provided for me through this other individual, I can see something I'm not looking at right now, and I can treat them better. I can honor them. I can, as the love and respect stuff goes, I can love her. She can respect me, that type of thing. Respect is oxygen to men, or air, basically, and love is air to women. And so if you don't have it, you suffocate. And we tend to actually, shut that down. And we are the conduit, in a lot of ways for that, other person. So the value blindness reset allows you to kind of say, okay, look, I didn't see this about you. I didn't see what you contributed to the household. I didn't see what you contributed to my life. And there's some certain values I'm not, they're the intangibles. There's the things that I could never get anywhere. I could never bundle enough professional services around me to get these things that you bring that are absolutely unique. Because if you bring them and they add value to my life and I add value to your life, that's amazing. That's what God designed. Is marriage is designed to be a value add where the total is greater than the sum of the parts. It's why it's that restoration of the image and likeness of God in, when Adam and Eve came together, but when we also come together with Jesus. It's that resolution increase, that going from, effectively a 720p resolution to 8K or higher, by simply bringing those two images together. It mathematically doesn't make sense, except that he made it that way. And we get the ability to partake. So if you're interested at theprayingcoach.com, very simple. But other than that, one, I want to know, has anybody got any questions? If you're watching and you really want to, drop a question, go ahead and do it in the comments. I can see both Pensight, or not, sorry, I can see both TikTok and Insta. Uh, and I'm interested to know what sort of questions you might have, anything you've observed, anything that you've been wondering about with regards to how to value your spouse or someone you think might potentially become your spouse. Miss Davis. Okay. Miss Davis is on TikTok. So, okay. Okay. Well, let me put it this way. God's default is that he created marriage, and his desire is that when a marriage is together, that it not be torn apart. You'll see in the New Testament, Jesus turns to the teachers, the Pharisees, the guys who knew the law, and he basically says, "Hey, Moses was given this law decree of divorce because of the hardness of your hearts. It was about their hearts being so hard toward one another, toward their spouses, that um, basically, he said, okay, if you really want to do that, you can. However, look at what the law says when you actually separate that marriage. Um, Now, there are a couple of things that it kind of makes sense that it would be allowed, like the act of adultery, which the act of adultery is literally, if you're looking at the metals being alloyed, for example, because I was talking earlier about metals coming together in the heat and the process that's necessary to bring them together to make an alloy. You can't really separate those metals without a ton of other heat and other things going on. The process is ridiculously intensive to even get them separate. Adultery would be like introducing a third metal into the alloy, but one that weakened the overall alloy, and indeed was an impurity in that. But when it came to the spiritual side of that, it was the physical act of intercourse is actually the marriage act from the perspective of what Scripture says. It says several times, and he knew his wife, had that intercourse. Um, the adultery itself was literally you are now unioned with someone God did not ordain. So when it comes to staying or leaving in a marriage, a lot of times it starts with, okay, are those acts involved? Or is that act of adultery involved? Because that is the only scripturally pointed out allowed reason for divorce. Now, they were also doing divorces where it's like, okay, I just don't, you cooked the food, you burned the food wrong. Here's a letter, you're no longer my wife. I'm going to go find a better cook. That was what they were doing in that time. They were ridiculous. So there was some really, they were really playing hard and fast. They were twisting a lot of stuff, and he was not happy with that. Jesus was not happy with that, because he said, "You're missing the point. The point of marriage is actually to be reflective of my relationship with my church, but also relationship with God. It's literally that important to him that it represent that clearly and cleanly." Um, I don't know your circumstances. The other aspect to this that is good to know is that there is provision to a degree for unequally yoked marriages. However, it's curious because it also does say, who knows, but the wife may bring the husband to salvation because of her acting out of obedience to God. Uh, but again, I don't know your situation, so what you have is a place where you go in with the Lord repeatedly and ask him to do several things. One, I would suggest focusing on the place in your heart. It's like, Lord, is there anything hard in my heart toward my spouse? Soften my heart. Allow me to see what I'm not seeing about them. Allow me to appreciate what you've given me in them. And you also pray that they would be drawn closer to his heart, and their heart would be softened too. And that because we have responsibility for where our heart is, where our mind is, we can't control our spouse. We start with us. We start with our relationship with the Lord and allow the Lord to touch us, because we can be a conduit for a lot of healing in our marriage. Uh, there's also, a lot of people will look at this and they think, well, maybe it's a really hard line. Remember, overall, forgiveness is a big part of this. Jesus died for all of our sins. So there's a lot of things we don't know until he extends his grace, mercy, and love to us that he's willing to work with. He'll take all these things and he works them together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purposes, right? So you could make a mistake of separating from your spouse, and you recognize it's a mistake, you repent, and he will still work through you and with you and so on, because you can't really screw up his plans. God's plans are God's plans. He knows the end from the very beginning. He knows all the details. He knows all the possible choices. He knows where he wants to get you, and he's going to, if you are obedient, he's going to lead you to that place that he knows he's destined you for. It could be a totally different route than what you could have gotten there before, but he can still get you there. With your marriage, though, the partner that if he's given you that marriage, and for me, for example, I know the Lord gave me my wife that he gave me to her and her to me, for a lot of different reasons. But the foremost is that I had a series of different encounters with him that brought me to that place. So 2 years before I met her, I was, on a tourist, trip to Israel. I was in a bus. It was an international group. I was talking with a woman from the UK, and it struck me. I hadn't found my wife yet anywhere in the States. Not like I'd looked everywhere, but I was in New England. I figured, hey, he'd bring her to me or bring me to someplace she was if she was around. So I was like, wait, maybe she's not from the States. Well, maybe she's from Europe. Maybe she's somewhere else in the world. Okay, I can deal with that. I can deal with that. And so what I did was just basically, okay, Lord, if she's not from the States, I'm okay with that. He dropped right into my head, like just it dropped right in, clear as a bell. Would it be okay if she was from South Africa? Then the next year, I had a prophetic word from a friend who's like, "Hey, I'm seeing an image. I'm seeing your wife is circling, looking for a place to land." And somebody told me, "Hey, you're looking for your bird wife." And then a year after that, I went to a ministry school in Texas. I was in New England. I went to Texas, first time ever. Yeah, radical difference, but whatever, cultural difference, etc. And in this ministry school, 4 days in, a woman comes in and she's from South Africa. But I didn't even remember from 2 years before what the Lord had told me. However, my spirit leapt in me. I felt this thing from my very lower portion of my gut all the way up and back down. And I knew it was my spirit leaping in me. I had never felt anything like that before. So those were clues to me that this woman was very important. And then many other things happened as well. And I have all along, and when I said I do to her, I knew that I knew that I knew this was it. This was she was it for me, and there would be no other, and that we were going to make life together. So that was at the core, at the start. Now, not everybody has that. Not everybody has it. They stumble into it. They think, well, maybe this is a good idea. I like the feelings, all the other stuff, and yeah, the feelings can disappear. The feelings can change. You grow. You mature. You learn differently. Your hormones change. A lot of things happen. If you hold on to that, the Lord was the one to connect you. It does provide a great anchor point. So with what you're talking about, um, if you really have a knowledge that your spouse is the one the Lord has given you, like flat out, what you do first, you go, okay, Lord, I trust your word, your ways better than mine. So I'm going to use that as the foundation stones, the very bottom structure of everything that I now do with you and interact with them about. You said this. I'm going to stand on your word. I'm going to trust you. And even if I screw things up, I'm going to trust you to actually work things out for good. Even if the whole thing blows up in my face, I trust you first. And you're going to make the arrangements for everything to be healed, come back together, whatever. From there, you have a confidence level that the Lord's got it no matter what. And you can operate from a place that is not one of lack or defensiveness or even a place of feeling like you're going to lose them. Okay. Let's see here. Yep. Okay. Okay. So you're questioning your emotions. Is that what you're saying? Is it really that you're feeling this, but you know that you know that you know that God is keeping you together? Because I get that there's a bit of a difference between the two because our emotions speak more about what's going on inside of us and our hurts than they actually speak about the reality around us. Because yeah, let's see. I don't know. Okay, you don't know if it's you or God that's keeping you together, or okay, you felt it was okay. Got it. Okay, so first I would say one, how long have you been married? Two, what was the beginning of this relationship based on? What was it? Where were the foundation stones essentially? And those would be two things I would look at. Um, and a lot of this is stuff, by the way, that I do in my coaching sessions as well. Just because it's a lot easier to hear actual feedback from somebody. But to give you an idea, if it were like with me at the foundation stones, because it was a ministry school we met at, but we also came there knowing the Lord would have something for us in our relationship with the Lord. We asked him both, or both of us asked him. Okay, so you've been together 14, married for 5. Okay. All right. So what you have then is You've got a combination. Now, what we did, I'll put it this way. It's probably easier in some ways for me because we've been together 15 years and it literally, we've been married almost that entire time. Um, so we met in the first time I saw her was in September. We got married, or we started dating in like January and we got married in July. Okay. So to give you an idea. Um, okay. Your grandmother married. Okay. So 14 years, married for 5. Okay. All right. So both of you, you're both believers then? Okay. Both. Okay. The trust. Yeah. Okay. So you don't trust him and you probably don't trust yourself. That's most likely what's going on there. And so you know, and part of the trust thing is that emotions often can become almost a proxy, really, for our for our understanding of things, because we will interpret things through that. Um, okay, all right. Hmm. Well, let me put it this way: you trust your trust is struggling, but do you, when you look at him, do you see things that you love and that you respect, or do you find it hard to respect him? Because that's going to be, a part of it is that, like I said earlier, oxygen to you, to women, tends to be love and respect for men. Okay, yeah, okay. You found it very hard to respect him. Okay. Um, have you? Uh, to me, this is actually a great place to do the value blindness reset that I put together. It's again on my website, but mostly because it would help you actually see um, what the contribution is for both of you. But yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. When you are, he says that you don't respect him. Yeah, okay. So he's feeling it. What he's saying, yeah. The prayingcoach.com, theprayingcoach.com, very straightforward. Um, he says you don't respect him, so he's feeling it. What he's actually telling you is, I can't breathe. I feel like I don't have any air to breathe because I'm not respected. And you probably feel the same. You probably don't feel like he loves you because both of you expecting a feeling of love, a feeling of respect, and it's understandable because that is often how we interpret it. We interpret love and respect from the standpoint of um, what we experience, and that's not wrong. It's just we need to look a little bit differently sometimes to find it. So, uh, does if, for example, one of the things I don't think we think about a lot of times, and the value, blindness reset may help you see this too, is what is he still doing that maybe he's doing something that provides value for you that you are not actually aware of. Um, One of the ones that usually, comes to mind is, like, is he still working a job or seeking ways to get money in? Or is he, and this one's one that really may not always make sense, but would he still be willing to fight somebody off on your behalf? Would he protect you in a way, where like he'd give his life for you still? Um, those are things that are, from a guy's perspective, being willing to do that is actually a way of showing love. Um, so even if it doesn't seem like it to our wives, it's part of our nature. We're still doing those things that we are able to do to be able to um, protect and provide. And protect and provide is in some ways an expression of love from a guy's perspective. It's not received that way by women by any means because it doesn't have the same feeling. It doesn't have that love feeling, that affection feeling, that that gentleness sometimes that women desire. Um, and love as far as a woman's concerned, uh, when she respects her man, it doesn't necessarily mean that respect to her doesn't mean the same thing as it does to a man. Um, Yet some of the things you do them and you think, okay, well, I do respect him. I'm doing this. And so some of that is a communication barrier where you're speaking two very different languages, and expecting two different things. Um, do you sit down and talk about this a lot, or is it something that you feel like you have the ability to talk through? Because sometimes it's difficult to do that. And I guess one of the reasons I ask it that way is because the safety mechanism on this. Um, I can imagine you probably don't feel very safe in some ways. Okay. Ah, got it. Okay. Um, hmm. So you're living with his mom for about a month now. Okay, so you've been separated for about a month. All right. Yeah, if that's been the case, there's probably a few other layers to this as well. But let me see. So he's with his mom, and she's probably right now. It's just because she's the safest place he can go. Um, and in all likelihood, that's really what he's probably trying to process through what he knows of his feelings, which, by the way, ladies, guys don't know their feelings the way you know your feelings, and the definitions are not the same. Um, Hence the reason that the best way to learn a man's feelings is to let him describe them and then take his description of them and use that not as you understand the feeling because it's not the same thing, but learn his definitions. And then eventually you can work out some common definitions. I think one of our big issues between men and women oftentimes is we don't have a common dictionary for some of our things that we think we do. Um, and it's both societal as well as just, physiological differences too. Because, there are actual brain differences, structural. Okay, so back to what you're saying, Miss Davis, is he's been he's been separate for about a month, and I imagine that's probably because he didn't feel respected, honored, a variety of other emotions that he was feeling, um, which go largely to validating his his identity to a degree. A lot of guys are taught that in order to be who they are, they get respected at work, but they don't get respected at home. Then they're going to be at work more, for example, because they can breathe better at work, since respect is oxygen. Um, Not unlike what women would experience either, because if you're with your with like girlfriends or whatnot, where you feel like they actually understand you, you're going to spend more time with people who understand you. We all tend toward that because it's it hurts less. Um, I think the again, to me, part of this is that there's probably an area you have a blind spot in that the Lord really would love to show you how He can give you vision in that area. Because it's really more about what does He want, what does the Lord want to heal in you specifically that will help you see your husband in a new light. Um, One of the like I said earlier, I see my wife as more beautiful every day. Do you realize, and when you look in the mirror, you're kind of going, wait, how's that possible? Because you don't think you're more beautiful every day. That's actually more of a vision change in me than it is even in her. I get to see more of her beauty every day. It's not that she maybe gets technically more beautiful every day from some outside metric. That's not important though. That part's not important. It's especially since she doesn't believe that. She doesn't look in the mirror and think that she gets more beautiful every day. Then what women don't. But what I would say is it's about a vision change. It's about being able to see things differently. Um, and yes, you're right. Okay, yeah. When he says stay focused on Jesus, here's the reason, that I think that that's an important aspect. Anyway, um, think of a horse. One of the racing horses, they put the blinders on, right? The blinders are to keep them focused on the track ahead, not to see the horses that are coming up either side of them. But one of the things that happens there is as you're staying focused on the track ahead of you and you're listening to the direction from Jesus, is that he will direct your steps in a way where you can come into the right alignment with your husband again. Okay. And your husband has to listen as well, clearly. So if it never actually happens, the point really starts with you're focused on Jesus so much that your heart is healed, whole, and okay if things never return because your focus is on Jesus and following him. Uh, and I get that it's hard to focus. Hold on. Okay. Well, one of my kids is here. Hold on. Elia, what is it?
Um, I found my terrarium. It was
Okay.
in where all the board games we played.
Okay.
That we played is. Bye.
Okay. Well, yeah, Miss Davis, you're certainly welcome. Again, I would say the value reset is a good idea. Just go ahead and look on my website for that. And I know that the Lord will direct your steps. If you want to talk this through, by the way, I do have clarity sessions. That's also on my website, a clarity session. And that's something that is I offer. In this case, I believe it's a 90-minute version now. But I have a rest clarity session that's on there that would be worthwhile doing as well. And then if you want to follow the path on the value reset, I do have a one-to-one that I do there as well. Okay, so and okay, also have Dahlia here. All right, Dahlia. Let me see. Dahlia, you say you feel like you need to do. Okay, that's what you need to do. Also focus on Jesus. Yep. Separate for 3 months. Yep. Oh, he's got a place and a girlfriend, and yeah, I can understand. Um, Dolly, are you actually like, have you separated, and divorced, or are you simply just separated right now? I guess that's part of the question there. Or were you ever actually married? In turn, okay, so you're not separate. Okay, got it. Okay, so that sounds to me like he just left. Okay, yeah, focusing on Jesus really helps. 16 years. Okay, yeah, indeed. And yeah, I agree with Miss Davis. Let me just quickly pray for you actually. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for Dahlia. Thank you. You know her circumstances right now. You know what her heart is breaking over. And Lord, I thank you for speaking into this situation, your life, your healing, and your wholeness. Um, right now, I ask that you speak to her heart how much you desire for her to not only come to you, but to release those things to you that she is holding on to, so that you can give her something healed and whole, that you'll take the ashes and give her beauty. You'll give her joy instead of sorrows, because you've promised to do that. You've promised to give us the things we need that are life-giving, that are actually from you, and that we can exchange in full exchange for the destructive stuff we have. You'll take on those things that are of no value to us, but that we will get things of immense eternal value. In your mighty name, Lord Jesus. So, Dali, you've been married 16 years. He just left. Um, is there something where you feel like for you that you missed something in terms of like did it catch you kind of, it was out of the blue, or catch you off guard, or was there a steady kind of distancing that happened? Okay. Now, I don't know how long you were listening or watching. When I was talking to Miss Davis, one of the things I want to make sure that we are all reminded of is that in the Bible it says that we are husbands are to love your wives and wives are to respect your husbands, and we don't always think about it as that's actually saying allow them air to breathe, because essentially respect is like air to a man. If he doesn't have it, he's suffocated, and love is like air to a woman. If she doesn't have it, she's suffocating. And when you're suffocating, you're fighting for your life, right? You end up fighting, and eventually, you're grabbing anything and everything, and ripping things apart until you can get air. Um, and okay, you keep saying I never appreciate him. Now, okay, so I would say he's saying that because that's what he feels. Um, that's real to him. You may not think it's real to you, and you may think you are appreciate him, and in some ways you probably are, but he's not receiving the communication. And there's a variety of reasons for that. I do think it helps to um, go back and look at where he has brought value into your life in a way that maybe you didn't see after a while. One of the ways I look at that is, for example, if the dishes were always done, at some point it becomes expected that the dishes will always be done, and um, you basically take that for granted. It becomes normal, and instead of appreciating it, he met a okay, yep, all right, she's young, okay. I would imagine he probably was getting his oxygen or his air need met. He didn't make the right choice, obviously, because, being married and, adultery is one of those things that is essentially in scripture, it's laid out as, grounds for divorce, but it's also reflective of a misunderstanding of what marriage is often about. Um, and it requires us to really reevaluate where we've been seeing things or not seeing things. Um, Focusing on Jesus is, like you said earlier, you feel like that's what you need to do, and I totally agree. Stay focused on Jesus, like blinders, essentially, because he is working through the process. He wants to work in your heart. He wants to make sure, Dahlia, that you meet him in a way where you feel some of those needs met in you that you've been longing for, but you get them from him first, because he's meant to be our source. Jesus is meant to be our source. No one else can really meet those needs except for him. However, the point of marriage would be that their spouse is supposed to be a conduit for it. We can't demand it of them, but they get to be a conduit for it. This is why we are to focus on each other. And why the self-focused thing oftentimes gets in the way. People take the do to others as you would have them do unto you, and they sometimes look at it as, well, if you're not treating yourself right, you're not going to treat other people right. But that puts too much of the focus often on ourselves. It's more about, okay, what did Jesus give me, and can I do that for somebody else? Um, yeah. And I'm glad, okay, you've been going to church and praying and being more focused on it. Fantastic. Keep that up. Uh, Keep focusing on him and listening. Okay. Um, yeah. Well, I don't know if you've watched some of my videos, but one of the things I talked about, I mentioned to Miss Davison earlier on, I met my wife at a ministry school, but the Lord had told me about her 2 years before, at least in as much as where she would be from. And I, met her, and once we started dating, it was amazing. But then we went to an event, and the Lord actually told me to let her go. And I did this one of my videos on TikTok. Uh, I reposted on Instagram, actually. He said, "Let her go. I want you to give her to me." Man, here I am. She's standing right next to me. I haven't married her yet. This is my, my fiance. Well, actually, she wasn't my fiance yet either. But it was literally like, Lord, you've set this up, and now you're asking me to give her over to you. Kind of like, Abraham might have felt about giving Isaac. It's like, hey, you gave me Isaac, and now you're asking for him back. I mean, what's going on? So what I did was I was obedient. I literally in my heart, I said, okay, Lord, I give her to you. I trust you to give her back if this is really, your purposes and plans. She felt it immediately. She felt the break. But what it actually showed me was that I had been putting her in God's place. I had actually been putting her up on a pedestal, or kind of holding her up as an idol, where I was looking to her to be the answer to all of my problems that God actually wanted to be the answer to. And so he allowed the separation to occur because of that. Now, uh, I think she also was doing something of the same, because of some of the things that, quite literally, she had been looking for her husband. She knew he was in the States, and there's a lot of things. So the Lord worked several things out simultaneously. He's never doing just one thing at a time. And then I prayed, I asked him, I gave her up. I got to the point where literally I said, "Okay, Lord, I'm actually okay if you never give her back. I actually know I'm okay, and I will trust you to take care of me, to fulfill your promises to me, even if you never give her back." And then he gave her back. And then he's like, "Okay, now your heart's in the right place, that you can trust me fully, even with her and with your own future, to the point where I can have authority in your life again, where she does not take my place." And as we, came back together, there was a whole lot of other things that the Lord revealed as well. One of them was that there had been some attacks that could have, really destroyed us, that were avoided in the process. Sort of like if you think about an enemy shooting an arrow at you, and at the last moment you step away from the place that he had, the enemy had aimed at, and the arrow goes past you, that type of thing, or modern day bullet thing. That sort of idea was that there was other things that were prevented by the obedience in that moment. Now, not everybody does that out of obedience. Sometimes it is okay, this separation happens, and out of that process, you realize, oh, I was not focused on God with all of me. I was putting them in the place of God. So I need to reevaluate. I need to recalibrate where I'm looking first. Um, and from there, once you recalibrate, then he's free to actually move you forward into your future in a healthy way. It also reveals wounds too, by the way. It reveals places where our pasts are now bleeding into our presence in a way that is destructive. And he wants to heal that. He wants to, bind up the brokenhearted, right? He came to set the captives free, to recover, give recovery of sight to the blind. A lot of these other things. He read it, Jesus read it when he was in the, synagogue, when he first got up there. It was out of Isaiah. And so he basically said he wants to heal us. Now, let me see here. I appreciate this. Yeah, that you're okay. Yep. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and Dolly, yeah, that's true, because your focus became more on being with him. Now, understand that your husband's focus on golf. There's probably a lot of reasons for that too, not the least of which is modern church is not typically geared toward helping men as much as it is toward helping women. A lot of church services are ones that women can relate to better. Um, but that's something that he has to deal with as well, and maybe there's a place he can go to, because men and women do relate to God differently. I mean, look at where God put them in the garden. Um, he created Adam, and the purpose Adam had in the garden was to actually take care of the garden, to till the ground. And it was such a big job, and it was something that God said, "Hey, it's not good for man to be alone." So he created woman, and the two make an amazing pair. Man and woman make an amazing combination, but they have different focuses. They're designed differently. There's things that you are designed to do that your husband could never do, ever. In fact, he would probably fall apart trying to do it, and vice versa, because God knows what he's doing. He's creative after all. Now, and yeah, if he didn't go to church or care about God, there's probably some wounds there. Did he grow up in church at all? Did he actually like grow up going to a particular church? Because sometimes what happens for guys is because they don't feel like they actually have a place in church, that they really, they shouldn't be going. Okay, so he didn't. All right. So then he doesn't value it necessarily. Um, he doesn't value a whole lot about that. Let's see here. Okay. He must feel like it's probably not worth his time. I don't know how he might have spoken about it, but I'm guessing he probably didn't, value it enough to want to go. Ah, okay. Okay, interesting. I was not aware that that was the way it typically went, but okay, makes sense. So he basically grew up not even seeing a value to it. That's a direction of prayer for him, by the way. One of the things that happens oftentimes in separations that's really helpful in refocusing us is that we not only do we put our eyes back on the Lord, but we also present our spouse to the Lord as somebody we want to lift up in prayer. We want to say, "Hey, Lord, I want your best for them too. I want your best for me, and I want your best for them." Um, and as you do that, it actually invites the Lord to connect with them in a different way because you still have, yeah, I mean, you're still married technically. I mean, if there's not a divorce necessarily on the table there, um, you have a spiritual connection. So you do have some authority in there too. And if you present that to the Lord and say, Lord, I want your best for him, and that's the Lord's desire already, then you're interceding, is what you're doing. You're standing in the gap for your husband, regardless of what he's doing. It also shifts your heart because you're loving him as the Lord would love him. You're laying down your life for him, essentially. Um, and that's helpful. That's really something because the Lord loves it when there are people with whom he can interact with on the earth. Look at how he interacted with Moses or with Abraham or with David or obviously with Jesus and then with the disciples. It was this interaction, God and a person interacting on the earth to bring about a change, to bring about something that actually shifted the world around about them. Um, we wouldn't have a lot of what we have without some of those interactions. So if if you are able to get to the place in your relationship with the Lord, or maybe you already have, where you can forgive your husband, you're still hurt by it, but you can forgive him, and you can you can put him before the Lord and say, Lord, I want your best for him. I want you to meet him where he is at and to intercept his heart. Then that allows the Lord um, a place of authority, essentially, because he gave us authority in the earth. He did. He can do a lot of things, but for some reason, he chose to allow us to be a conduit. It doesn't make any sense, but he allows us to be a conduit. I mean, Jesus said, I do what I see my Father doing. Um, Yet Jesus was the one whose hands and feet were doing it when he was on the earth. So, um, okay, you pray. Okay, yep, and you texted him. Okay, good. That is good. That is very good. And yes, saying that actually does two things. One, it actually allows you to be free from a lot of the associated bitterness and things that can grow from unforgiveness. And it also plants a seed. Now, he didn't have to answer, but it can plant a seed um, because at some point the Lord will bring him back to that. And you don't know when, but the seed's been planted, and now the Lord can deal with that. None of this means, of course, that things will come back together the way they were, and you don't know because the Lord will write the outcome of this and allow Him to. By the way, allow Him to write the outcome of your story, and you just walk in obedience with Him, um, because if nothing ever comes back together and if you're in the place of being okay with the Lord writing the story his way rather than you getting the outcome you're looking for, you're actually going to have a much better story. uh, he is the one who knows all things. His um, ability to write the outcome of a story is pretty phenomenal. I mean, greatest story ever told, right? He's written that. So but I do bless you, and I applaud your obedience for just going ahead and literally just sending him that message and saying you forgive him, because that's an essential step in your own healing process too. And keep following, keep pursuing the Lord. Uh, you know, draw as close to Jesus as you possibly can. At this point, I'm sure you're much closer than you were. Uh, Not the way you wanted to have it happen, but He is faithful. And if you want to, my website, theprayingcoach.com, value reset, the value blindness reset is really just a very simple, 7-day audio teaching series about, really looking at helping us, and a worksheet too. No, sorry, that one's not 7 days. It's a 10-minute teaching with a worksheet that walks you through how to reevaluate the value that this person actually brought to your life that you didn't see. Because again, like I said, if the dishes always get done, at some point you take it for granted, and when they don't happen, it throws you for a loop. But you don't realize that you haven't been, giving gratitude for what's been happening. And so it helps us to always reevaluate, to really look and recalibrate our vision of the other person, so that we can actually be thankful for who they are, and give, basically be able to give God thanks and say, thank you for this person, and then tell them thanks as well. And I'm sorry that he left, um, and that he was feeling that way. So, but as the Lord heals you and shows you the places where you've been blind to things and where he wants to give you vision, I believe you will be able to find healing and wholeness in that too, because that is part of the process. He desires to heal us in ways we didn't even know we need to be healed. Uh, so now, if there's other questions, great. Let me just see here. I'm not even sure how long I've been at this. Yeah, and yeah, your mother-in-law is correct. Um, she is. I'm sure she's hurting too. By the way, she's got to be hurting. Um, but this is something where you get to the place where the Lord has healed you, and you're going to be able to genuinely love him in a way that you weren't able to before, without any sort of expectation, because you're going to be able to have, I believe, that um, kind of that Christ-like love for him. I can imagine she's disappointed. Yes. She's dealing with, where did she make a mistake in raising him, and having to process through that emotion and that pain. Um, I'm sure that he's kind of not sure how to process his part. But for this, it's focus on getting closer to the Lord yourself. So, because that is so important, as you draw close to him and he draws, near to you, the healing that you can experience will be substantially more. So, um, is, anything else you have, that you'd like to add, or questions, or I hope this has been a blessing. And everybody's welcome to. Everybody's welcome to chime in if they got some questions. Again, I'm talking about relationships from the standpoint of where we've been blind often to the value people have added to our lives, and that often happens. We notice that when they've left, or when they're no longer there, because we really don't see things that we've taken for granted until they're gone. But once we can see them, then we can actually reevaluate, why was I blind? How can I really reposition myself and allow the Lord to heal those areas that made me blind? Um, I know, one of the examples of going into a relationship blind oftentimes is that your expectations of your spouse are really what you grew up with, right? They didn't grow up with it, but you grew up with it. So you're looking at them to fulfill the needs that were fulfilled in your own household growing up, or to react in the way that they reacted, in your household. So, for example, if there was a parent that was very angry, or very had a lot of rage, or maybe was an addict or a narcissist, or some of this other stuff that you hear a lot about, you tend to expect that of your spouse, whether they are or aren't. You tend to expect that of them, because that's what you know. That's what's familiar. Even if it's not safe, it's what's familiar. So then you react to them if they get a particular look on their face that maybe looks like what your family member, your dad, your mom, your sibling, whatever, got on their face when they were in a particular mood, and you were accustomed to translating that, then you automatically translate that into, oh my goodness, they're going to be like this. And yet, from their perspective, their expression is what their parents did for, maybe it's confusion or asking a question or something like that. And so you have this down cycle that occurs. So that that kind of creates a blindness to who the other person is, because we didn't grow up with them. Well, for the few people that did, then that does help usually. At least they have common ground. But if you didn't, like for me, for example, my wife and I, two totally different continents. I mean, totally. So she was from South Africa. I grew up in New England. I grew up in the state of Vermont. So now, not much. I'll put it this way: the my experience with international was Canada. That was it. So I had a totally different experience with what another culture might be like than what she did because she grew up in South Africa. Her experience with another culture was some of the other tribes that were in her country. But also deeply rooted heritage for her was a part of it. And my heritage wasn't quite the same thing. So we've had some interesting interactions where we have to learn who each other is in a totally different way. We have to actually learn that the other one doesn't hear the same way as we do. They don't look the same way, look at things the same way we do. And before you get into an argument, it's always good to take into account that their perspective may not be your own, and maybe it helps to do that, to get their perspective on something. Not easy when your tendency is to want to protect yours, but you get there eventually. But again, the value add that they give to your life, I as I started the whole thing out with, the actual numbers are astounding sometimes. Um, the being married, you actually end up contributing a whole lot more of your resource and time that if it were valued in dollars by professionals would require you to have 3 times the salary you now have, essentially, just to take care of the infrastructure, not to account for the intimacy or the relational stuff that you really can't monetize. You can't evaluate that, and yet we do it all the time. We mistake what our spouse does for just what they're supposed to be doing or what we expect them to do, rather than appreciating that they are adding something to our lives and we're adding something to theirs and saying, I appreciate you. I thank you for that. I love you. I thank you. You're adding so much. We're more together than we can be separately. Um, Often that looks like respect for men and love for women. So um, I'm going to wrap this up here, unless somebody else has some additional questions or anything. Definitely would have, I've appreciated being able to speak with you guys. And let me see here. If you are interested in doing anything with me from a coaching standpoint, you can definitely check out my website, theprayingcoach.com. I've got a number of resources there. If you want to talk one-to-one, do one of my clarity sessions, because that is the one-to-one in-depth time. A lot of times I'm looking to help people figure out, one, is what I do as a coach really going to help you get where you want to go? What I want to do is I want to help stabilize you in your identity, especially around whatever loss you've experienced, help you understand who God, sees you as, make sure you've got strong foundations that you can build upon for your future. And I do this with, people, men and women, but primarily Christians, because I want to have, each one of my brothers and sisters be able to see themselves as God sees them. And that takes a little bit of working around with our foundations and where the fractures are so that we can actually get into the place of a clearer identity from his perspective. Again, my website, theprayingcoach.com. You're definitely invited to go there. The clarity session is a gateway session to longer coaching. I typically offer, 90-day coaching because 3 months is a good period of time to really see a significant transformation in your life. You want to be able to have a lasting transformation. And 3 months is a good place to start. So, again, thank you so much for watching, both on TikTok and on Instagram. And I appreciate the time and have a blessed day. And I will see you another time. God bless.